Hi, and welcome back for your daily dose of LOL Esports content, where we're going to cover the LCK Week 1, Day 1 that occurred earlier this morning, many hours ago, and preview the two series that are going to take place in several hours. Predictions, I went 2-0 in these two predictions. Thank God we can recover after the abysmal LEC start. So this first series, if you didn't watch Sneak Peek yesterday, these two series had very different vibes. In that DRX Nongshim is a battle of the 2023 CK players that are brought up with DRX and in Sponge, Satab, and Playeta, and Nongshim, who are utilizing Din, Sylvie, Calmy, Jiwoo, and Peter from their 2022 squad. Now, I had Nongshim winning this 2-1. They win 2-0. Let's go over how these games transpired. So, game one, DRX actually had Nongshim's number heavily. Um, yeah, it was really odd. So DRX invade off the rip. Nongshim and DRX trade objectives. Nongshim takes Drake, DRX take Grubs. But then DRX would go mid, DRX would take Grubs. Nongshim would go bot, take Drake off of that. DRX invade and get a kill. Then DRX would go bot lane and Nongshim would take Rift Herald to offset that. And at 15-15, Nongshim had a significant gold lead on my um, board here, but I feel like DRX had the gold lead in this one, um, quite significantly. Nevertheless, the CS diffies were in favor of DRX. So they were down 7 CS in top lane. Din ahead of DRX, but Sponge was ahead 31 CS over Sylvie in the what I believe was a Poppy Jax matchup. Very menacing Poppy for Sponge. He ended up building Bruiser with it, starting with Black Cleaver. Mid lane, Satab actually had Calmy's number he got after him. In the Oriana Azir matchup, he was ahead 22 CS, and then the bot lane of DRX were ahead 14 CS. They were going great, but in the mid to late game, it all fell apart. Nongshim had a couple Drakes, and they were able to actually play towards that objective, forcing DRX to respect that. And in doing so, Din was like split pushing out of his mind, going to the Nexus. But going through taking inhibs and things like that. And in the end, Din ends up being MVP for this series for me. And it's game two was a lot stronger than game one out of him. But in game one, if you pay attention to the macro and how he just pressured the Rift, DRX really had no answer. Not to mention, Rascal on Udyr did not really get that far ahead of Din's Gnar. And in game two, Din gapped Rascal in a Udyr versus Jax matchup. So, in my opinion, there was quite a diffy there. Calmy had a lot of relevance, though, in the mid to late game on the Azir. I will give him credit recovering from that pressure. You see that he led the team in damage. That is indicative of that, right? So he ends up finding a way to be relevant, making plays, and frankly, Satab not as impactful. Jiwoo and Teddy back and forth dealing quite a bit of damage. For some reason, DRX chose to go with Lucian Nami both games. We saw with the LEC, Lucian was a little sus, and the Aphelios for Jiwoo was a lot more powerful in the late game team fights. In game two, Nongshim would start off by going mid lane, so they're clearly saying, hey, Calmy is not going to be behind today in this game. There was a trade, Drake for Grubs, DRX take Drake, and Nongshim take Grubs. DRX would go mid, they would take Grubs again, winning a fight 2-1 in the process, Rascal getting a double on the Jax. Nongshim take Drake, and then Nongshim take Rift Herald. Laning phase ends at 15-20, and Nongshim have a 4-3 advantage. So Nongshim get the advantage in game two. Game one, DRX were at 6-4. So over the entire series, it's 8-9, very close between the two. But the CS diffs were massive in favor of Nongshim in game two. Din ahead 34 CS, Sylvie 10, Calmy 23, and then the bot lane of Teddy and Playeta were only up 2 CS. So Nongshim just heavily ahead in game two and taking that lead and just completely running with it. It was Like the team fights, frankly, it was like DRX are trying to deal damage and Din Din just running in there on Udyr and just tanking it all. Just no care in the world, just showing how OP Udyr is. I know somebody in the Discord mentioned the Talia and how LEC didn't pick it, and you're like, oh, why didn't they pick it? Because in the LCK it looked good today in the game it was in, and Call Me had it in game two. Picks like that were interesting, nice changes of pace. We haven't seen the Udyr top very much. Now, Talia obviously was a meta pick at times last year, but the Udyr was important in both series. I believe the Udyr also appeared in the Gen GT1 series. So, laning Diffie in game two for Nongshim. And, I mean, they take those leads and they just end up running over DRX. And it's unfortunate because DRX actually had a really good first game in the early game. Sponge was all over the place, and they just could not take those leads and actually get anything going in the late game. So, stats: Call Me 6-4-12, 31% of damage. Peter only died once. His support for Nongshim with 22 assists. Teddy 5-6-5, 38% of damage in the loss, and like I said, Din Din was MVP. Then we have T1 Gen G. I had Gen G winning this one 2-1. That is indeed what occurred. So T1, I gotta say it was an ugly game three out of them. It was really lopsided after what was two very competitive game one and game twos. Game three was just not the case. So in game one, very slow. I think this game was like a 4-6 kill game or something like that. Just like absolutely terrible, if I recall. So T1 and Gen G trade grubs for Drake. Gen G would then take grubs themselves and then go topside, attempt to dive. T1 outplay it. T1 would then take a Drake later. Gen G go bot lane, and T1 take a Rift Herald off of that. The laning phase ends at 15 minutes with T1 up 1.5k gold. In terms of gold diff or CS diff, Owner was ahead 16 over Canyon. Zeus ahead 7, and then Gen G's bot lane ahead 24. Gen G's bot lane very impactful in this series. Pays and Lehens really got after Guma and Keria, and then Lehens had a lot of pressure in the second and third game. In the third game, big time on the Rakan, and frankly, Keria had no excuse, and we'll get into that. So Lehens ended up being MVP. Just one of those slow, boring LCK games in game one that ends up being T1's win. They win a team fight and just end at like 27 minutes or some shit. And it's like, oh, well, that's the game, right? You can't lose a team fight like that and expect to, not have the game end in your face. In game two, so game one, let's look here. It was 4-3 in favor of T1 when it came to making plays. In game two, T1 would start the game off strong. They'd go mid lane and affect Chovy. They would then go get grubs later and go mid off of that. And Gen G respond by taking Drake. T1 would go topside, get a 2-for-1 in terms of kills, and take grubs off of that. Gen G would take Drake and get a kill. They would then invade and kill, I believe, Owner. And then T1 would take Rift Herald. So in game two, after laning phase, 15 minutes and 15 seconds, the gold lead was pretty much non-existent for T1. They did do 5 plays, if you will, where Gen G did 3. But in terms of CS diff, T1 strongest diffy was 12 in the bot lane for Guma Keria. And in the mid to late game, they just didn't have it. Gen G were able to find opportunities. Chovy on the Tristana. Canyon also going in. Those two glued. And Lehens as well with them. And honestly, that's part of why Lehens gets MVP. Like I said, game 3 is a big reason, but game 2 as well. And Pays finding opportunities to affect the Rift, affect team fights. And he ends up actually somehow getting 18 kills and leads the team in damage. And it's one of those things because a lot of the action was in mid lane with Chovy. He was all over the place. A lot of these roams and things like that were because of him, whether it was on the Corki in game 1 or the Yone in game 3. Keen, pretty non-existent in the top lane. Zeus got the better of him in game 1. And then in games 2 and 3, it was kind of just... I mean, Keen was ahead big time in game 3, but game 2 is kind of just like whatever. So speaking of game 3, This one, very lopsided for Gen G. So they get a level 1 off, and once that happened, Kyria died. Gen then get a pick, and they go top. So they start 3-0. They are rolling. T1 end up taking grubs, and Gen G take a Drake. Gen get a pick. Then they would go bot side and get another kill. And then they go bot side and get another kill, or at least go bot side again. Sorry, no guarantees of kills there. T1 would take grubs after actually losing a player. So in a 4v5 situation, they secure grubs. And Gen G say, fine, well, Pays on the Varus is going to take this complete turret at 11 minutes. That's the quickest game so far when it comes to laning phase so far this year. And Gen G were up 3k gold. And all of it was on Pays. So when I'm going over what happened here and talking about this early game, I'm not mentioning Lahenz's pressure on mid because he kind of went. It was like a 2v2 situation, but Lahenz initiated it. And frankly, you look at it, and Kyria is on a Bard, so he should be everywhere, and Lahenz kept up with him. And now that Lahenz is shot caller for this team, and you see the level 1, and you see the decisions to trade objectives and things like that, I am going to give Lahenz a little more credit this year than I had in years past when he was on other teams. Obviously, Gen G when he was there before, I believe Peanut was the shot caller. So, in terms of CS diff at 11 minutes, mind you. So, Gen G had 21 CS in top lane, 26 CS in... Am I wrong here? I think I might be wrong. Negative 23. Maybe Pays wasn't ahead in CS, but he had a ton of gold. Starting this new way of doing the board and the recaps of these games, I have to better organize who's blue and red side. Like I have it here, but it's technically the opposite of what I have at the top because we have 3 games and shit like that. So regardless, there was quite a few diffies. I do believe Canyon and Keen were ahead, and then the bot lane of Gen G was behind, I guess. But all I can think about is Pays' Varus just picking off kills. And maybe it was in the mid game that really started happening. I obviously watched these games quite quickly trying to pound this video out. But regardless, game 3 was very lopsided. And once Gen G kind of got rolling, I will say it took a long time. I believe this game was like almost 40 minutes in terms of length. And given the diffie at 11 minutes, you would have hoped that they would have snowballed this to a sub 25-minute game, but that comes with the territory of the first series. Some other notes that I thought about just now that I wanted to say and I didn't. T1 did not look on the same page. There were moments. I remember Faker on the Nico in, I forget if it was game 1 or game 2. He went in a couple times and I think it was game 2 because they lost. He just went in a couple times and died. And there's not a lot of follow-up. Zeus going in and dying and not a lot of follow-up. It's like they just weren't on the same page. And I figured, Gen G would win. So, Pays 18-5-14, 32% of damage. Canyon 4-2-25 in jungle. Zeus 6-9-16, 24% of damage in the loss. Pretty even damage spread. Kyria played Melio, farmed his face off. Farmed his face off. Almost had 100 CS. Played Senna as well. MVP was Lahenz. Sneak peek for tomorrow. We have Brion and D plus Kia. D plus Kia are 8th in my power rankings. Last time these teams played, D plus would win 2-1. Only 4 of the 10 players from that series that started play tomorrow. Showmaker and Karis is the only matchup that lines up. Showmaker 6-6-14, 23% of damage in the win. Karis 7-4-9, 23% of damage in the loss. Then we have Fear X versus KT. KT 12th in my power rankings. Last time they played, KT would win 2-0. 4 of the 10 players from the one game that I'm going to cite here. I technically, now that I thought about it, I could have cited game 2. But we're already here. So 4.5, I guess, out of 10. Yeah, because what KT did in this one, they played their starting lineup in game 1 and then completely their challenger roster in game 2 and won both games. And because Clear played for Fearax lives Handbacks at the time in both. I could have compared Perfect and Clear's game 2 and not just BDD and Closer's game 1. But regardless, so BDD won 7-3-10, 32% of damage in the win. Closer 4-2-5, 25% of damage in the loss. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked it, like it, subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content. Follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, become a YouTube supporter, and hope to see you again tomorrow.